for starting this, Camille, is kind
Mhm.
of what do you see as typically the biggest, the first roadblock, the most common roadblock people have to starting some kind of program?
That's a good question. I think the most common roadblock I would see for an ambassador program is, I think, just naming it that and really seeing it as a tool to invest in. Like you shared a lot of examples of folks kind of using ambassadors maybe by accident, maybe just because. But I think recognizing the super fans you do have and using the network you have instead of always looking for the next new thing. You have a community you can invest in right now if you just kind of name it that and make a plan. So I think that's the biggest roadblock.
Yeah, that's great advice. We have a question here too. So thank you for the questions. Keep the questions coming. We do have, till noon if we need the time. So we've got a question. Mark asks, talk about instances where you needed to train ambassadors. So that's another thing, right? I suppose if
Mhm.
you want it to be really effective, you got to provide some kind of something support training. So could you talk to us a little bit about how to approach the training?
Definitely. And Mark, I'm so glad you asked this question. It's really important when I earlier talked about quality versus quantity. You want your ambassadors to really feel like they have that deep understanding of your brand and what you stand for and what they can do. So I would, I guess it depends on the level of training that you think your brand needs. I'm really a big fan of once people join a program or sign up, they receive an email automation with more resources. You can also have sort of monthly events where you're always training new ambassadors, like a Zoom call just like this. Um, I always like to have some sort of like repository where people can go. Maybe it's just a Google Doc with like your logos and information about your brand and events you're doing. Maybe it's like a monthly email that you send out to everybody. But you want to make sure if folks aren't already working closely with you as an employee or as a program participant, that they do feel welcomed and on the A team. And this is a great opportunity to send them like swag, stickers, stuff like that. Does that answer your question, Mark? Feel free to ask another if not.
Yeah, I've seen one of my clients who is a housing for elderly, and they,
Mhm.
when someone new moves in, right, it's a big kind of, big experience, right, moving, into assisted living, and they have a ambassador program, and they have special T-shirts, and they kind of have a whole outfit, right. So
Yeah.
even if you're new to a place, you can just recognize them physically in the building. You see, oh, this is part of that welcome team. And then I know they also pay for like a basket of nice stuff to give the new person moving in. And so, those ambassadors don't have to put that together themselves. It's something that the chefs and the cooking people, they put, here's some nice food and muffins and stuff. So that seemed like a pretty cool program. We've got another question now from Stacy. Um, she asks, can you speak about best practices for helping staff become ambassadors?
Yeah, that's another good question. So I would say if you need to convince your staff about the power of being ambassadors, you can share some of this data about how the platforms are moving, they're prioritizing video, they're prioritizing people first. That's going to be really important. But I think for your staff becoming ambassadors, it is not that different from any other kind of ambassadors you would have, is that you want to think what's going to motivate them to share. Maybe that's like a referral bonus or some sort of prize, or you're paying them more to make time to do this. I think if you've already got a marketing team, that would be the first place to start, to kind of think of who can we put as the face of this brand, who has time in their schedule. Um, and I would say you want to always kind of make people feel um, included too, so that your staff are, they know what to do to become ambassadors. So that's where it can kind of help to think about like, we really want people to post on social media, or we want you to be able to talk about it in these networking instances. So kind of having something that they can do that's very clear um, will help a lot. Um, yeah, I'm seeing thank you. Some of our members are not tech savvy, so physical items they can share in person is a great idea. I'll also say something that helps a lot if you're trying to create content for staff being ambassadors is to kind of meet them halfway. For example, the I shared the example from Lunar Startups of our director making Instagram reels. So that's a completely collaborative process. I wasn't just like, hey, film some reels, edit them, and post them on Instagram, right? So we kind of are able to meet every month, talk about what topics we want to do, how she's going to show up. She films those videos, sends them to me. I do all the editing, matching with the sound, adding the captions. So if you can think of ways for your staff to kind of meet you halfway to be ambassadors, that's going to be really effective. Great questions.
Yeah, that's great advice too. I feel like that that is really important. Yeah, the whole concept of support. And it kind of runs the gamut, right? Like I showed you that
Mhm.
Shaquille O'Neal example. While he was very passionate about helping this organization, right? They've been working together forever. He could not make the live virtual event. So I actually interviewed him and filmed him separately and mixed his pre-recorded content in with the live panel content as they go from question to question, and the audience has no idea, right? So in case of like the A-listers, it's usually like a big scheduling thing. It's like schedules are very difficult. So anything you can do to work around schedules is always a big thing I've found out. So keep the questions coming if you have any. I have, of course, some questions of myself. I'm going through my list. What do you think that ambassadors? Ambassadors, of course, will probably be a part of a larger program. And you talked about how
Mhm.
you're leveraging them on like every channel.
Mhm.
Can you think of some things or give us some examples? What do you think ambassadors really do, marketing wise, that they do way better than other, types of marketing or traditional types?
Well, good question. I think that let me pull up my notes so I can make sure I'm referencing what I discussed in the slides here. Yeah, people trust people, like I said. So they're able to have that immediate trust and community connection and know how it's going to land the best for their audience. So, for example, back to the question of how staff can become ambassadors, maybe you would want to go to your staff and ask, like, where are you seeing opportunities? The community is always asking you, where can you show up? So by investing in people, they're gonna tell you their people, and what's the strongest referral to anything? It's word of mouth. That's what all of our marketing is trying to generate, right? So, um, and I know about you, but I'd much rather follow a recommendation from someone I know than a brand who's maybe posting like a graphic design in Canva. Like, who am I more likely to listen to? It's the person. Um, and ambassadors are also able to get you access to communities that you're not reaching right now with your traditional marketing. So, for example, if you want to reach young people and your brand is mostly on I don't know, Facebook and LinkedIn, maybe working with ambassadors there will say, oh, you should come to this after school presentation, or you should connect with these people, or we need to get on TikTok. So you're going to be able to get insights about your target audience faster if you're engaging and listening to your ambassadors.
Those are very great points. Yeah, and no, we've got more time for questions if anyone has any. Also, kind of a general question for our audience. Um, if you have ideas of how you would like to leverage ambassadors, if you've got an idea, fundraising is a big thing, or this, or we're trying to find more program participants or whatever. If you've got an idea of maybe how you would like to leverage it, throw that in the Q&A, and we can take a look, and maybe Camille has some ideas for you.
Yeah.
Um, another thing about that I'm curious about. You made a really interesting point about, bringing them much more into your organization, giving them sort of a peek behind the curtain, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And so I'm wondering if you could let us know how you think that kind of really helps. What do you think an organization should do? How close should they pull them in? And what are the benefits you see when they kind of have more, insider information to the organization?
Good question. Well, you want to invite more people into a team where you feel included. So that is what you want your ambassadors to feel like you're investing in them just as much as they may be investing their social capital in you. And it doesn't have to be like, look at our budget for the year or it's kind of revealing all of these sensitive things. It could be like, hey, we're thinking of launching this new program. Would you answer the survey? Or we're building a new website and we're testing it. Do you want to be a beta tester? Um, or we're hosting this event and 10 minutes before we're doing this, Q&A with our team, like, would you like to come? So I think just any way you can to give people, make people feel included, um, learn more about something they're passionate about, and all of that is giving them tools to talk about how great your organization is and what they get from it. So it's hard to kind of I gave some examples, and it could even be as simple as, hey, this is a monthly email for all of our ambassadors where you kind of say, um, we tried this and it worked this ways, here's why we're going to try this in the new quarter, just any, you want to know what's going on with an organization you care about. And presumably, all of your ambassadors care about you. So, if there's special information you can share with just them, that's going to increase their or strengthen your relationship with them. And remember, ambassador marketing is all about that relationships.
Yeah, that is great information. I love that. We do have someone who popped in the chat with kind
Oh,
of an idea. They asked, would you advise nonprofits to have an ambassador kit when trying to incorporate ambassador marketing into your strategy? They say, for example, um, launching an ambassador campaign and providing the community of ambassadors with assets and branded posts. What do you think about that? Is that if you're providing too much, is that not authentic? Or do you run the risks of kind of making it all seem the same? Or could you maybe
yeah.
think about where is that? How do you find that balance of authentic versus providing too much support and too much branded stuff?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I would say first I'll take it as if you're these are not this is not sponsored content. This is ambassador as in maybe like an event co-host or an event guest or a network of folks who have signed up to be your ambassadors. I do think it's important to provide people with some assets such as um, information about your org, maybe some posts for Instagram, some place to get them started. Um, because as someone mentioned, some people are not always as tech savvy. And I think it's important that they feel like I have a toolkit and something to work with. Maybe that's even like a list of ideas of, for example, if you're having ambassadors who are your donors, like, 10 ideas for a house party to give or something like that. So those kind of resources, rolling them out consistently is going to be important. But I do hear you of like, is this not as authentic? But at the same time, I'm always thinking, especially if I'm not paying people to do that, like if it's that time where I'm asking all the lunar startups, entrepreneurs, hey, tell your friends about our applications opening. Like, I know these are very busy people. So are they going to be able to like sit down and like craft something special, like maybe for a couple folks, but if there's a tweet, they can just copy paste, or if there's a link already written, they can run with. Um, I'm always trying to think of that as well. If you're paying someone, like if you're working in a sponsored content type of situation, you definitely have your goals and your brand message that need to be communicated. But I think it's really important as much as you can to let your ambassador take the driver's seat. Again, they know what content their audience is expecting of them, what's going to resonate with them. And it really should be more of a co-creation than you telling them what to post. Um, and so I think it's always great to have a place to start from, and hopefully that's how you're able to continue building this relationship. So these kind of organic recommendations of your brand to come up in their day-to-day life. Does that make sense? Feel free to ask again if it doesn't.
Yeah, that's great information. And yeah, for sure, if anyone else has some questions about that, looks like we have some more questions coming in.
Oh, here we go.
Here's a
Q&A.
great one. This is going to be interesting. Nicholas asks, how do you deal with an ambassador who's gone off the rails or is somehow linked to something that's contrary to what your organization does? That's a tricky one.
Well, I think it's important were you to launch a formal program or to start spotlighting folks. I'm presuming your own organization has like a code of conduct that perhaps your staff, your volunteers, your program participants adhere to. Um, whether or even if it's as simple as something as not sharing false information. Um, so when this happens, I think if those rules are made clear and someone violates the rules, like they face those consequences. But I guess I would hope you would never get to this point by really focusing on the quality of the ambassadors you're working with rather than just getting everyone under the sun, right? Who might only have just like a passing interest in your brand or just want to be in it for the reward or something. For example, a client of mine has an ambassador program. They're a tech product, and one of the requirements for being an ambassador is you have to be using the software. So like it doesn't make sense for someone, just a random person who wants to try and get this, referral reward to use it. So kind of if you have some sort of process, and again, this could be in the training where you talk about like as an ambassador, we expect you to post truthful information to align with our code of conduct. And if before at the start of the program, if you have outlined what's going to happen if they don't, then you can be able to address that problem as it comes. Good
Yeah, that's good
question.
advice. That's a tricky one. I have a client with an internal employee who wants to make videos,
Hmm.
for them, and which is great because video work can be really expensive. It's
Hmm.
sometimes it's out of the reach of nonprofits, but we're gonna have to help them because like he was making all these videos in not the right logo and kind of not the right font and not the right colors, and it's coming from like a good place, but it just he kind of needs a little bit of that support, like a toolkit.
Exactly. The
That's a really
training, the support,
specific,
the toolkit.
yeah,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
it's a really specific toolkit sort of example, but how we're helping them is basically providing them with video templates so they can make sure, so they don't need to worry about that. It's taken care of.
Hmm. Hmm.
We have any other questions? Keep them coming. This is a great discussion. There's a lot
Yeah.
a lot
I'm
to
loving
think
it.
about here. I think it's really getting people thinking about how they may leverage these ideas.
Hmm.
Um, I know virtual events has been a big one, at least for a lot of my clients. Co-hosts has been a great thing, right?
Hmm.
Especially because a lot of times, sometimes, especially more well-established nonprofits, they don't necessarily look like the community they're trying to help, right? There's kind
Hmm.
of it's a little different. They may be trying to help a much younger community or a community that lives in a different part of the state, or that's just the leadership of the nonprofit can be phenomenal leadership, but just might not look and be like the same demographics as who they're trying to help. So I know co-hosts for events have been a big deal for a lot of these.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where it can kind of help to sort of, especially in the nonprofit world, sort of stronger together. Like, for example, the Lunar Startups and the Coven, a co-working space on one hand, an accelerator program on the other hand, they've got very similar audiences and they can share both of the email addresses and all the signups, together. So that's a great strategy.
I have noticed too. It seems like I worked a lot in the for-profit world too, and which is it's a lot of competition, right? People are always competing.
Hmm.
They're competing for these dollars and sales and whatever customers. But it does seem like in the nonprofit world, there's a less of that competition. There is a more like we can all do better together, and there's more sort of helping each other out. That was another thing that kind of piqued my interest about the ambassador stuff, because I know sometimes an ambassador in the world I'm working in, this nonprofit world, they may be an ambassador for more than one organization.
Mhm.
So have you ever run into that? How do you deal with that if you have someone who you really want to be an ambassador for you? It seems like it would really work, but maybe they actually are already doing some of that work, but for someone else. And maybe it's not like a direct competitor, but just, in the same genre of work, the same kind of general community. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one kind of successful way to grow your ambassador program is looking at what your competitors are doing and like where they're engaging. And I would say it would just be a matter of like, uh, I guess I'm kind of picturing in my head someone who maybe has more of that celebrity status or more of an audience than, for example, the people who like your social media posts the most or who are your program participants or donors. So I think it would be important to introduce yourself to them. Acknowledge that they're working for this competitor and suggest your product is an alternative for their audience or your organization for this reason, or ask if they can align somehow. So I think you can try your best. And then if you are spending money to um, hire someone to create sponsored content or be an ambassador, that's going to be on you to do the research to make sure they're talking and not aligned with brands that are maybe unsavory to you, and that you actually have that real relationship. So if I'm an ambassador for like a hunger organization and I do organization A on Monday and organization B on Tuesday, I probably didn't have that strong of a relationship with either one. So it would be on those organizations to really build that relationship so that true fandom and love is there.
Yeah, that's a good point. You may run into that sort of divided loyalties or divided attention, or not, getting the most out of it. So we have just a few minutes left. If there are any more questions, this has been great. Now, you will get a follow up email, and you'll have Camille's contact information, my contact information in there. And then, of course, there will be a link too to watch it again. So, if you want to see any other parts again, we'll have some example links to anything we can link to that we show that were good examples. We'll try to get that out to you as well, so you can look for that follow-up email. If there are any more questions, I'll wait a little bit longer. Doesn't look like we have any more coming in. So we just have a couple minutes left. I do want to thank you so much for sharing all this awesome knowledge with us. I really appreciate it.
Yes,
And
great
I hope
opportunity.
I really hope more nonprofits start to take advantage of these concepts. I think it's a huge, and like you mentioned, the shift in platforms.
Mhm.
That's always something that's hard to get traction on a platform. Looks like we do have something coming in there.
If you decide to allocate budget, how much would you allocate for this budget, and where would you advise the funds to go towards if you are not paying the ambassadors?
Okay, so a budget
Mm.
question. Any ideas on that?
Well, I think it's important to budget staff time for whoever is going to be like managing this program. I think if it really is about building those relationships and quality versus quantity, it's not going to be something you can just like tack on, right? Like, oh, do this in addition or just add this. So that's one important consideration would be your staff time. Um, then secondly, I would try and figure out, whether it's like a referral bonus or prizes or like events, like how are you rewarding your ambassadors? Like what's in it for them? Do you have to pay for that? And then I would think about paying like some sort of system to manage your ambassadors. I mean, maybe you already have this, like, we're going to send emails via HubSpot and they're going to be stored in this list, or we're going to use this other program. Um, and then yeah, the staff time kind of goes along with providing all the assets and opportunities they have to engage with you. So that's how I would think about it. Good question.
Yeah, that's great. Um, yeah, I suppose you have to. I often see that sometimes people forget about the staff time, the opportunity
Yeah.
cost. If you're not doing this, you have something else to do. So those are good points. Keeping on tabs of that. Unfortunately, too, of course, in the nonprofit world, of course, it's like they're always stretched for staff. They, it's like
Mhm.
they do tend to overload sometimes. It seems overload people. So